Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another video. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday. Today we're going to be talking about Champions League qualification, also Ampadu and his time at RB Leipzig, and Chelsea's unsung hero Mateo Kovacic. But before we get into any of that, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button because it helps out the videos as well. But getting into the problem of Champions League qualification, how are UEFA going to solve it if the big European leagues can't be completed because of the current pandemic? In recent days, we've heard a lot of conflicting reports and suggestions about how a decision will be made on qualification. Yesterday, UEFA's governing body apparently made a statement saying it was going to be based on sporting merit. And a lot of people ran off and made their own assumptions about what that meant, because it is a pretty loose and broad term. So as you can see here in this article by the Evening Standard, why UEFA's Champions League decision is good news for Chelsea. Europe's governing body announced that while leagues should explore all possible options to continue their respective seasons, Champions League and Europa League places must be awarded on sporting merit should that become impossible, meaning a possible points per game system. There was some concern for Chelsea after suggestions that UEFA could look to base qualification for next season on club coefficient ranking, which is determined by their year-on-year European performance. Now, firstly, that points per game sort of system that UEFA would go by, I think I'm pretty almost certain that the Evening Standard and a lot of other outlets have taken that from a tweet from another journalist, Martin Ziegler from The Times, who tweeted about this, which came to the attention of a lot of fans when we heard about this yesterday. As you can see his tweet on screen now, talking about points per game, but that was sounding like points per game, which sounds like points per game. That was his word, so he was taking it based off of the statement from UEFA. That's not what UEFA have said, so they've not clarified what they're going to be using, because once again, sporting merit is a pretty wide term. It almost feels like, to me, and I've seen this with a lot of the statements from the Premier League, the EFL, UEFA, they feel like almost non-statements in a sense, because a lot of people have jumped to conclusions about what this meant. You know, I saw in regards to bias and club bias a few days ago, and we talked about the club coefficient ranking, that meant that Man United and Arsenal would benefit off it. And of course, their fan base were very happy. And then, of course, yesterday with sporting merit and potentially a points per game system, which would benefit Chelsea because Chelsea would be in the top four based off of that. But we don't know. What sporting merit means to me is probably different to what sporting merit means to you, in truth. And we don't know what sporting merit means to UEFA should the Premier League and other big leagues not be completed because of the pandemic. So I think, number one, I think people have jumped very quickly, mostly down, as is always the case when we talk about tribalism in football, go down the route that benefits their club the most. We don't know, because all of these things are still on the table. Points per game, coefficient. Is there another way? Is there a fairer way of doing this? We could look back maybe to almost forgetting the qualification for this season and looking at the qualification in the Premier League, for instance, in 18-19, which once again, of course, would benefit Chelsea. But it's not so much about benefiting Chelsea, it's about what is the fairest way. And I have so much sympathy, as I've said on this channel before in videos, that I have sympathy for the big decision makers, because how do you come to a fair conclusion about this? Because points per game doesn't really take into account who Chelsea are yet to play, or who anyone else is yet to play. I mean, Chelsea in the current fixtures would still have to go away to Liverpool. We'd still have to play Manchester City. I believe we still have to go away to Sheffield United. And whilst other fans of other clubs have said, you know, that isn't really fair, because some teams, of course, based on the fixture list, have had to play tougher games sooner because the games haven't been completed yet. So I just would say to anyone like jumping to conclusions of running away happy or sad about this, we don't know. The hope is, like the Bundesliga, they're hoping to do soon, is we can complete the Premier League season, because that is probably the only definitive way this is going to get done, if we do complete the Premier League season somehow, some way, because then we'll truly know in a fair way. But if it isn't, and this goes on, drags on, and the Premier League cannot be completed, then UEFA are going to have to make a strong decision, and that strong decision is going to upset somebody. Financially, I think that's the biggest concern for, I think, a lot of people in football, that fairness and financially, it's going to impact clubs in a major way if they can't qualify for the Champions League. I think Leicester could come out of this being really harshly treated. You know, they're very much on course to qualify for the Champions League. But we just have to wait, because this is by no means a definitive answer. We have no definitive answers in regards to when football will properly return, how the Champions League is going to be sorted out. So we just have to wait. So any sort of reports, don't be fooled in these big reports claiming it's going to be positive for this team, positive for that team, negative for that team. You just have to wait. That's all I'm going to say. Next, I want to talk about Ampadu and his time at RB Leipzig. He gave a massive interview to The Athletic earlier this week, and I definitely suggest you go and read the full interview because it goes very much in depth on his time at Leipzig, his development, some of his background. I think it's a really enlightening interview that I definitely suggest you go and read. But just taking out some of the quotes about his time, maybe some frustrations about his playing time at Leipzig, which has been a concern for Chelsea and Chelsea fans. We'll go through the quotes and I'll give you some opinions and talk about Ampadu a bit more in his future at Chelsea. So he said, "There's been a lot of frustrations at times. However, I've learned a lot through those frustrations, which will only help me later in my career. I've not played as many games as I'd like to, but in the games I've played in, I think I've done reasonably well. That'll give me confidence, but I have things to learn from. I don't regret coming out here and having these experiences." Now, with Ampadu being a Chelsea loanee, Carlo Cudicini leads the loan player department at the club, and Ampadu says the former goalkeeper has been Ampadu's main point of reference at his time in Leipzig. He says he came out here early to see how I was, which is nice to know someone's looking out for you. In football terms, we have a discussion after every games I've played in. Even if I've played 15 or 10 minutes, he's still gone and found some clips, shown me things I can improve on or where I've done well. Every Chelsea loan player gets that. I believe the time and effort that's put into it is very good. My end goal is to hopefully one day be a regular at Chelsea, but for now, I have to think about the now and do what is needed. I think maturity is a word that's referenced a lot in the article and the interview itself, and that comes across not only in Ampadu's words, but in Ampadu's performances on the pitch. You see that, and that is something that impresses so many people when they watch Ampadu play. For Wales, for Chelsea in the short time we've seen of him in Chelsea, and also, of course, for Leipzig in short periods. I mean, that star performance that he gave against Tottenham in the first leg of the Champions League knockout tie a few months back was absolutely brilliant. It truly was, and I thought playing in that role, I think it hopefully enlightened, more Chelsea fans to see what Ampadu's capable of and how maybe signing a new centre-back maybe isn't a big priority for Chelsea this summer. Could Ampadu be that new centre-back for Chelsea? Could he slot in alongside Antonio Rudiger, Andreas Christensen, Fikayo Tomori, Kurt Zouma? I mean, you could see Tomori and Ampadu as a very long-term centre-back pairing for Chelsea in the future. Just that maturity and that decisiveness I think that Ampadu has. He never looks uncertain on a pitch, which I think is a brilliant aspect and a brilliant attribute to have still at such an early age. And yeah, sure, the loan move has been frustrating to not see him play as much as we'd hoped. I think actually maybe Leipzig doing as well as they have under Nagelsmann maybe has been a detriment to Ampadu. If they'd maybe been struggling a bit more, Ampadu may have got some more playing time because, of course, you look at their team, it's so settled, it's playing so well. So that has made it difficult for a young player like Ampadu to get minutes. But still going out there, being a bit more cultured, getting a new sense of football in Germany, which I think is a really good place to learn about football, has clearly taught him things that will help him later on in his career. Please let me know your opinions on Ampadu. What do you think his future is? If he was to come back, say if we don't sign a centre-back and he is now one of the new centre-backs for Chelsea, who are you letting go? And also, who would you pair with Ampadu? Would Ampadu be in your starting back four? Please let me know in the comments below. And lastly, I want to talk about Mateo Kovacic. The other day I made my who should be Chelsea's player of the season. Kovacic, of course, was my choice. And I talked about in that video when I was praising Kovacic about naked eye over stats, about how when people throw assists and goals at you to sort of be sort of a negative about Kovacic, about his impact and how good he's been this season. And when you actually watch Kovacic, you can see the impact he has. But Sky Sports did a really good article enlightening people and sort of educating a bit more on some of those stats, that Kovacic does have very impressive stats to back up his impressive season. As you can see here, Premier League unsung heroes, Chelsea's Mateo Kovacic, the Croatia international's goal and assist tally, a single strike and 5 assists in 57 Premier League games, hardly sets pulses racing, though it's his work in getting Chelsea into attacking positions that separates him from most midfielders. Kovacic has been one of the best Premier League players at running with the ball, and you can see this now on this graph on the screen about most ball carries Premier League this season per 90 minutes. He's right up there with Fernandinho. The midfielder's average of 28.9 per 90 minutes ranks second this season, the most overall in his position and significantly more than any other Chelsea player. Also, best dribble success rate percentage in the Premier League. And of course, as you can see, Mateo Kovacic is top of this list. For every 10 take-ons attempted, the midfielder dribbles past an opponent on 8 of those occasions. The ratio is not only best of all the leading dribblers, but also leads to the Premier League. Even the prolific trial rate is at 70%. While this doesn't translate directly into goals and assists for Kovacic, his work just before these actions is just as valuable to his side. He completes more passes per 90 minutes in the final third than any Chelsea player this season. season. I think this whole article, really demonstrates why Kovacic is so crucial to Chelsea this season and why he's going to be crucial. Only at 25, he's still got a long way to go, and what he can do, and sometimes why perception over reality. I think the perception, of course, of Kovacic is much more positive this season. But for those who aren't as favourable towards Kovacic, or those who don't watch Chelsea as regularly or don't study Chelsea as regularly, won't see the impact. Graham Souness is someone who constantly derides Mateo Kovacic. I remember seeing a quote before Christmas calling him a six-a-side player. Really demeaning quotes. We know what Graham Souness is like. He's done this to Paul Popper as well. But these stats show the truth. The truth is of what Kovacic actually does. And when you rank him against other players in his position, when you rank him towards his fellow Chelsea midfielders, and just because he isn't scoring all of those goals, the likes of Mason Mount, the likes of hopefully Loftus-Cheek in the future will benefit off of his movement. They'll benefit off of what he does. But really, if you're a fan of Mateo Kovacic and you're someone who believes he's Chelsea's player of the season, this article, just show someone this article and they'll be able to see what impact he has. And I feel hopefully these stats in the future will become more prominent, and I think more people will take notice of them. But what it does do is, when we're arguing about who should be Chelsea's player of the season and the actual impact of what Kovacic does in the Chelsea team, you can show them these stats and tell them this is a player who definitely has a positive impact at Chelsea. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.